Bob and Becky Klosterman are a handsome, engaging couple.
He was quiet, he had good credentials, and he had a great car.
He is a gifted fighter pilot, and she is his perfect, doting wife.
They look like a power couple. She looked happy to be on his arm, and he looked mighty happy for her to be there.
But when scandal rocks his naval career, their marriage begins to sink.
And all of a sudden, here come the police, and they extricate him from the house.
Becky was a nervous wreck that last year. She couldn't sit still. She couldn't sleep.
Bob waved the gun at himself. Then Becky spat back at him. You don't have the guts.
Love may be blind and marriage bliss, but divorce is murder. It's 1973. The Vietnam War has just ended, and soldiers are returning to Oceana Air Base in Virginia Beach. 27-year-old Bob Klosterman is one of the lucky men to make it home alive.
Bob was a pilot. He had just come out of Vietnam. He had been flying helicopters. He survived it. That was a big accomplishment where a lot of his friends didn't.
Becky Cofield is a 21-year-old local girl with a job at the base. She meets Bob after work at a bar.
I think it was called The Shack or one of the oceanfront clubs. And she met him there. She was out with some friends and he was out with friends. And that's how she met him here in Virginia Beach. He was nice, he was quiet, he had good credentials and he had a great car. He had a white Corvette, and most pilots, it was kind of a typical thing, they usually had nice cars.
Becky's personality and good looks catch his eye.
She was very outgoing. When she walks in a room, you know it, because she's smiling and happy and very outgoing and makes you feel good.
Bob is not like the other guys Becky knows. She's a single mom, and she's looking for someone serious.
He came in uniform every time, which stood out in Virginia Beach, in the foosball parlors, in the places where teenagers hang out. You just didn't show up that way. She didn't care. He didn't care.
He was very smart, and so with those things, it kind of helped, her say, hey, this is a good guy, and this is the kind of guy I like to, spend my life with.
About a year after they meet, the Navy sends Bob to Mississippi to be a flight instructor, and Becky tags along.
I remember Becky saying, well, how are we going to get to Mississippi in this car? It's a two-seater, and we have a child. So his remedy was to put a luggage rack on the back of the Corvette.
Things get serious very quickly.
He called me and said, Mary Ann, I met somebody and I want to get married. I said, oh, that's good, Bob. Are you going to come home for the wedding, No, we're just going to get married down here.
They look like a power couple. She looked happy to be on his arm, and he looked mighty happy for her to be there.
Bob adopts Becky's son, Todd, too. Next, the new family is sent to Jacksonville, Florida, where Bob trains as a jet fighter pilot.
They lived in a town called Orange Park. They had a nice little ranch house on the back of a cul-de-sac, and it was south of town.
Becky settles into the role of housewife.
He went to work, he came home, she made him the meals. It was just typical. She watched TV during the day when Todd was at school.
And Bob connects with friends.
I always felt welcome at their home, whether Becky was there by herself, whether I brought a bag of donuts in or not. I felt welcome.
And Becky throws herself into the role of Navy wife.
As soon as you marry into the Navy, you become a Navy wife. And Becky took to that quickly. She was always happy to be at Navy functions and parties and social events.
Becky makes friends with the other Navy wives, too.
When you had a problem, as a Navy wife, there was nobody to call. All you had were the friendships you made with these other women, and they took care of each other.
Bob advances steadily in his career, serving tours overseas as a junior officer, a department head, and an instructor pilot.
His goal was to be the best, and if there's a rank to come up and it's an opening, he wanted to be the guy to get it.
As Bob's rank increases, Becky learns to navigate the subtle politics of Navy functions.
Most of the military men knew how to use their social contacts to further their career. Bob didn't do that very well. Becky didn't mind doing that. She would find out all the information he needed, and then he would go put it into use.
Psychotherapist Stacy Kaiser and forensic psychologist Brian Russell have seen this dynamic in military couples before.
At the beginning, I think Bob was just exactly what Becky was probably looking for, and Becky was probably just exactly what Bob was looking for.
But Bob's constant deployments take their toll, and after only 2 years of marriage, they start to drift apart. Bob wishes Becky would contact him more when he's out at sea. He writes to her, and she never replies.
In those letters, he would beg her to write to him and go ashore, and several guys would get 7 or 8 letters, and he would get none. Then he would say, "I love you," and there was a silence.
His whole life is focused on his career and moving up in the ranks, and that she feels neglected, and so that this is her way of trying to make an impact.
Bob seems like a guy to whom appearances are important, and I wonder whether Bob may not have also been concerned about the way that it looked when his fellow officers were receiving more letters from home and he was receiving so few.
As much as he wants her attention while away, when Bob is back on leave, Becky often finds him distant and in a bad mood.
You would think it would be a wonderful homecoming. Hey, how you doing, whatever. Well, he had been on the base for a couple of hours. He just hadn't come home. And when he did, he would do this snorting sound. And then he would say, "Hey," and then go to the bedroom.
His behavior, coupled with his long absences, leave an uneasy feeling in the household.
Becky was a little tense around Bob. She was to not only take care of the house and the child, but it had to be on his schedule.
Todd would run for the hills. He would go to his room, he would avoid the situation, and then Becky would, deal with a grumpy husband.
So if he didn't tell her what time he wanted his dinner, and she didn't have it ready, his expectation was, you're going to keep it warm, just like the galley keeps it warm for all the sailors.
Becky also notices Bob is drinking a lot, and it worries her.
I was having a lot of conversations with Becky about Bob's behavior. She didn't understand why he had this urge, this need to drink heavily.
She suspects Bob's drinking and bad moods are linked to his wartime experiences. He flew 440 combat missions in Vietnam.
They didn't have a term like they do now, post-traumatic stress, but she felt that's what the problem was. She couldn't imagine a man saying, "I love you," and then being rude or impatient. In her mind, that did not connect. So either there was something that had broken in the war, or she didn't know this man, and she tended to go to, he was broken.
I wouldn't say that Bob has full-blown post-traumatic stress disorder, because I would be looking for things like nightmares and flashbacks, which I'm not seeing. But what I am seeing is this agitation, this tendency towards depression, and it could have something to do with experiences that he had during the war.
Becky is angry that he can't control his drinking and is risking his career and his home life.
She was so mad at him for jeopardizing what he wanted out of life for something stupid as to one last drink.
And after 4 years, she even considers ending their marriage.
And I think at that point she was ready to leave him.
But Becky has secrets of her own.
To pop both those things on him with very little prep, I don't think he really could ever get over that.
Bob Klosterman is a pilot with a promising career in the Navy and a beautiful, supportive wife. But by 1977, 3 years after they get married, his drinking is out of control. Luckily, it hasn't affected his naval career.
I do know that he was drinking regularly at all hours when he wasn't flying.
But it has begun threatening his marriage. Their relationship is in tatters when Becky gets some unexpected news.
Bob was out to sea, And she realized within the first few weeks she was pregnant.
But for Becky, it's not good news.
The doctors had told her before not to go forward with any pregnancy, that they couldn't guarantee that either one, she or the child, would come out okay.
Becky doesn't tell Bob she's pregnant. According to Kitty, Becky suffers from hyperthyroidism, a hormonal imbalance that can lead to heart failure for the mother and birth defects for the baby. A few days later, she terminates the pregnancy. She keeps this a secret from Bob, too.
I've got to believe that in a healthy marriage, if a person was happy with their spouse, they would have come to them immediately and said, you know, I have medical issues and I cannot have these children.
Bob returns from his deployment, and things are as strained as ever. One evening, the couple is arguing over Todd's homework when Becky drops a bombshell.
She picked it that night to tell him about the pregnancy and the abortion at the same time. She was far enough along for them to know that it was twins, apparently.
Keeping a secret can give somebody a sense of being empowered. And I think that that is at play in this particular case, because you can see that she chose to bring that out at just the precise time when she was engaged in a conflict with Bob and she needed or felt the need to exert some power over him.
Bob is devastated.
To pop both those things on him with very little prep was difficult, and I don't think he really could ever get over that. He always wanted children.
Bob loved children. He even told me, I told him once, I said, oh, gosh, Bob, do you think maybe you'll be the one with twins? And he goes, oh, I don't know, that'd be something, wouldn't it?
Becky loves children too, but she never talks about wanting more.
She never voiced that because she felt like the one child she had was all that she was going to get, safely. So she never presented it any further, but she loved kids.
She even avoids the issue by telling people Bob was exposed to Agent Orange during the war.
If somebody said, well, why don't you have any children? She would just say, well, I don't know what kind of kids we would have. They just wouldn't come out right after Agent Orange.
Agent Orange seems to me to be an extremely flimsy reason that probably was something that she said to other people as a means of sort of shutting down discussion about the topic.
I truly believe that she didn't want those kids. She was afraid that he would try and stop her, and so she took care of it before he could get home and know about it.
Bob's reaction is to head to a local bar.
The issue that for him is that he never knew she was pregnant, comes back, and then she tells him this.
Becky had a habit of baiting Bob when she was angry with him, and her friends believe that's probably what she did.
Becky chose to tell him basically that she hated him, and she made it an argument. Rather than becoming a medical issue that as a couple they dealt with and moved on, it became an emotional sticking point for Bob.
Her sister believes that if Becky put off telling Bob about the abortion, it was because she was afraid of his reaction.
What kind of wife doesn't tell him unless she thinks he wouldn't take it well?
The same night, Bob is allegedly pulled over by police.
There were certain people who were very close to Bob and the Naval Air community who reined him in and basically told him, you will not do this again, period.
The police don't charge Bob with a DUI, but the incident serves as a wake-up call about his excessive drinking.
He gets serious about the fact that if you want to be commanding officers going on down the line, you want to progress, you can't do those things.
The Klostermans soldier on, keeping up appearances. For Bob especially, it's in his best interest to make the marriage work.
The Navy finds it very important to put people in leadership with strong spouses. In fact, in Bob's performance reviews, they took note of Becky. They called her vivacious and bubbly and an impressive couple.
Bob continues to excel in the Navy. He becomes a high-ranking officer, drops bombs on Libya, and leads sailors in Desert Shield and Desert Storm in Iraq.
When he starts to focus, and he keeps that focus on flying in the airplane and progressing in his Navy career, he's pretty golden.
By the end of the 1980s, work brings Bob and Becky back to Virginia. But this time they're in Norfolk, the place to be if you're an ambitious Navy man.
Norfolk is a Navy town. The Navy is central to the region's economy, and it's central to its identity.
When Becky and Bob moved to Norfolk, they thought it was an important move before he could become admiral, before he could think about those higher reaches that he had been planning for all of his career.
And it's a good move for Becky, too.
She was excited because she had told him that all those years that they were in Florida, that was his choosing. She told him that if he had the opportunity, she wanted him in Norfolk.
Bob, Becky, and Todd move into a big house in the upper middle-class suburb of Pleasant Point. They live well, and their spending habits prove it.
This was a relationship in which both were very good shoppers. Most people conservatively don't have that many suits, but he did. She was known for her jewelry, in fact.
By 1993, Bob is appointed commanding officer of the Navy's most powerful warship, the aircraft carrier, the USS John C. Stennis. He is hired to help oversee its construction and eventually run it.
This was going to be his ship. This was something that he designed, that he helped have an input in, and then he was going to be able to be commander of it.
It's a floating city of up to 6,000 sailors, and the captain is responsible for every single one of them.
It's a great achievement.
The Navy praised him, actually, for saving $70 million in construction costs just by his efficiency and planning.
Bob's promotion means a lot to Becky, too.
I think Becky loved every moment of that. That to her meant that the partnership over these years amounted to something.
A commanding officer's wife in the United States military has a role to play that could be likened to the role of a first lady. I think the stability of that spouse does become a consideration when the top echelons think about moving that person up into their ranks.
It's a wonderful honor. It is a position with responsibilities for helping the morale of the crew and helping sailors' wives make it through the difficulties of Navy life.
To her sister-in-law, however, it seems Becky likes her new status a little too much.
She was walking around, and it was cold. So this little sailor was walking behind her, carrying her coat. And she'd go here, and she'd go there, and he's going after her because it was the CO's wife. And all I could think of was, I want to grab that coat and say, let this poor sailor go do something else. But I think she liked that kind of thing.
The Klostermans appear happier than ever. Everything in Norfolk is going according to plan, or so they think. Just after Bob is made commanding officer of the Stennis, Becky becomes entangled in a high-profile scandal. The Tailhook Association supports and promotes the interests of Navy pilots. Every year it hosts a conference in Las Vegas that is famous for its parties. And although neither Becky nor Bob go to the 1991 convention, it still ends up affecting them.
Many of the pilots have a reputation for having great parties and having fun with alcohol. Some of the more infamous moments of the drinking bouts were in the Tailhook conventions. At the 1991 Tailhook convention, there are allegations of sexual harassment on several women who attended the party. Inappropriate behavior, inappropriate remarks. Women filed complaints against the men who harassed them. Those complaints were investigated.
The incident shocked the nation and served as a wake-up call to the Navy's male establishment. It was dubbed the Tailhook Scandal and made headline news for months. It was a huge black eye for the Navy. In 1993, after a 2-year-long investigation, people are finally called to trial.
Becky didn't attend, and neither did Bob. What happened was one of Bob's friends and his new wife attended, and she was subpoenaed to testify here in Norfolk, Virginia.
Bob's friend's wife is Carrie LaRocque. She attended the conference with her husband and allegedly saw Frank Kelso, the chief of naval operations, in the same suite where some of the worst assaults took place. According to Bob, Becky takes LaRocque to and from court, and the two Navy wives strike up a relationship.
Becky befriended her after that experience, and Becky was sympathetic to her complaints against the Navy.
Bob has just been made commanding officer of the Stennis. The last thing he needs is for Becky to sympathize with the person testifying against the highest-ranking officer in the U.S. Navy.
Bob told Becky, I don't want that woman in my house. I don't want that woman anywhere near us. Stay away from her.
And she clearly didn't do what Bob had asked her to do, which was to back off.
What it says to me is that she put her relationship with the woman over her relationship with her husband. Because at the end of the day, she knew that there could be complications for him if she was too aligned with this woman, and she did it anyway.
There's a pattern with the abortion and with this tailhook thing as an excuse to do something that was against Bob's interests, that was a way for her to assert some passive-aggressive power.
But according to Becky, she doesn't know Carrie LaRocque at all. She simply gives her a lift when Bob asks her to.
She matter-of-factly told the story that I went to the airport and picked her up. I drove her to court as he asked me to do. That's all there was to it. She said, how did I get stuck in this? I didn't even have anything to do with it. This is a bad deal.
No one knows who's telling the truth.
It would be very plausible that Becky would get involved. Becky told me one time Bob wouldn't have gotten that far in the military if it weren't for her.
At the end of the investigation, the victims receive a financial settlement, and LaRocque's testimony is thrown out over her credibility as a witness. Kelso is never charged. Bob remains commander of the Stennis, and his goal of becoming an admiral is still in sight.
His superiors praised him for being a top helicopter pilot, a top A-7 pilot, and he was praised for being a top administrator when he took control of the Stennis.
But then, after riding out the tailhook storm, Bob gets involved in a scandal of his own.
Becky knew that Bob cheated on her.
The Klostermans faced several challenges in the first years of their marriage. But by the early 90s, they appear to have worked past their issues and moved on. Bob rises through the ranks of the Navy, and Becky supports him along the way.
They seemed to be happy. They were still married when most of my friends were getting divorced, and I thought it was fantastic.
Bob helped save the Navy $70 million on the construction costs of the Stennis. His track record and position practically guaranteed, he feels confident about being made admiral.
If you are named commander of an aircraft carrier, odds are very good that you're going to become an admiral and vault into the top of Navy leadership.
But after 2 years, it's clear he's not going to get the job.
When you don't make it on the first pass coming off a carrier command, it's usually a sign that it's not going to happen.
It's kind of like getting in a fraternity. One guy blackballs you, you're done.
Could Becky's actions after the tailhook scandal have anything to do with it?
It would be a big deal if Becky did befriend this woman who took on the chief of naval operations. Because it's a small community. People talk, and they hold grudges, and they don't necessarily let go of those grudges.
Or was it Bob's own shortcomings? Becky's sister suspects he didn't get the promotion because he didn't know how to work the back rooms of Washington.
Bob was going back and forth to the Pentagon, and the Clinton administration didn't want any military up there in their uniforms. You come in a suit. Well, that stripped Bob of everything he had. He couldn't go and present himself as Captain Klosterman. And he didn't know how to play, or he didn't want to play the politics.
He even has trouble communicating with his own men.
His personality was too direct, abrupt, and he lacked a lot of compassion. There was a blog, and a couple soldiers commented on what an SOB he was. I guess you can call it hard-ass.
In 1997, after 28 years of active service, Bob retires.
I think that it was probably devastating for Bob to not make admiral. And it's perfectly understandable to me as a psychologist that when everything that you had been building your life and career around starts to fall to pieces, that you might look for some external place to place the blame.
He invested all of his time and energy in building his career and focusing on moving up the ranks to the top. And so to not be able to reach the top could make a person literally fall to the bottom.
This man had never, ever worked outside the military before, and here he was in his 50s. And he was expected to change the game plan.
On the home front, Bob and Becky are less busy now that they've left behind the demands of the Navy. But that doesn't bring them any closer.
I just got the general impression that it was sort of, I don't want to say an unhappy marriage, but not the ideal marriage that you'd want to find yourself in someday.
Like a lot of retired servicemen, Bob finds work with a defense contractor.
If he had an offer at the Newport News shipbuilding, he obviously had a lot of relationships with the people building ships.
Bob devotes himself to his new job and sees his family, especially his in-laws, less and less.
Bob quit showing up for most of our family things. And that wasn't expected of him to be at everything. It just, it's nice to have everybody there for Christmas. He wasn't there at Christmas.
Becky is lonely at first.
I had lunch with her a number of times right after him leaving active duty. And she kept going back trying to find, the people in her life from the Navy days.
But she bounces back and busies herself with a new hobby.
She had become hooked on tennis. She liked tennis a lot, and she was playing very well. And she had a lot of friends from that, who were good friends.
Bob finds it harder.
He was stressed.
He seems to cope by playing more golf.
When Bob was in the military, he would play a round of golf a Saturday. But when he was retired from the military and he was stressed, he would play for weekends.
He also starts to shop a lot.
Every day, something came from UPS. If I was at the house, there was always something being dropped off.
I don't mean he would shop for a new pair of shoes. He would shop for 5 pairs of shoes and maybe 4 suits. But maybe 4 suits weren't going to be enough. He needed one in every color.
But some say Bob is just spending more because he's earning more. He pulls in over $400,000 a year at Newport News on top of his pension. After the initial adjustment period, life at the Klosterman residence looks a lot like it did before Bob retired.
Becky was still doing the same thing she always did. She's taking care of the house, taking care of the yard, taking care of the dogs, playing tennis, and, handling the household duties like she always did.
And Bob has turned things around.
He seemed to be happy with the ship designing. He seemed to be very happy with all his retired fellow service guys. They had golf leagues and all the stuff he'd tell me about.
But in 2003, their lives are about to change forever. At Becky's urging, Bob quits his job and goes to work for her cousin, Bill Anton.
It was seen as an opportunity, a great opportunity for him, and that she wanted him to do this.
Becky's cousin Bill is a wealthy entrepreneur looking for someone like Bob to help him manage some of his projects.
My cousin needed a non-political face that would get the job done, that had power behind it and possibly influence that he could tap into of the people he did know.
Bill asks Bob to help oversee construction sites, including the building of a large residential home.
He built this big, nice house up in a very nice part of Upper Michigan, and Bob was like the project manager. I think he's excited about the travel and doing something different that's not government-related.
Bob and Becky are also excited by the prospect that the new job could make them richer. Anton gives Bob a signing bonus and a bigger salary than he was getting before.
This was a chance for Bob to really earn some cash in the final years of his working career.
But the new job isn't like the old one.
When he went to Newport News, he was working with people he had been in aviation with over the years, and it was good. It was a different line of work than what he was used to. He just wasn't happy. It wasn't even in his realm, really, to do this.
Bob is never home, and Becky finds herself alone again after all those years of being a Navy wife.
I would hang out at their home and chat with Becky, and lots of times Bob wasn't home.
He was busy and traveling for the company that he was working for, and he wouldn't tell her where he was going. He would just, I've got to go.
Sometimes he'd surprise me, walk up to me. I'm working at the ballpark at the Reds game. I turn around, there's Bob standing there. He's got a ticket for the game. He came into town.
Becky begins to suspect Bob of having an affair.
Becky knew that Bob cheated on her from the early days in their marriage. But she turned a blind eye when it happened overseas.
But she finds it harder to ignore so close to home.
I think Bob misplaced either his credit card or his wallet or his telephone. But she gets a phone call from this place called Camelot.
The Camelot Show Bar is not just any old night spot. It's a strip club in Washington, D.C.
Well, he wasn't supposed to be in the D.C. area. And so she asked him, Bob, you missing your phone?
He said, oh, I dropped that running, and I must have been running past them, and they found the phone, and that's how it ended up, they're calling me.
After Becky confronts him, Bob heads to D.C. to pick it up. Despite his denial, deep down, Becky knows he's lying. She just doesn't know to what extent. Soon, the tension between the couple comes to a head.
Bob waved the gun at himself. Then Becky spat back at him. You don't have the guts.
Becky Klosterman overlooks the fact that Bob, her husband of 32 years, left his cell phone at a strip club in D.C. She is trying to make her marriage work, and on the surface, he is too.
I'd say that Becky and Bob look like they belong together. I have videos I was looking at, even all the way up to 2007. She's sitting on his lap.
But soon, it doesn't matter. Things are about to fall apart. In the spring of 2008, Bob tells Becky he's lost his job.
It didn't end up very well. He ends up being basically fired by his wife's cousin.
The reason he gives is vague. Something about a misunderstanding over a construction project. Her family hears another story.
Bob was to be doing a job for my cousin, and he was going off and doing what he felt like doing.
Becky can't believe the news. If it's true, then where was he when he said he was working? When a bill is mistakenly delivered to their house, Becky discovers one possible answer.
He had changed where the mail was coming to. It went to a P.O. box. And the only reason she found any piece of that information was that one of them came to the house by mistake. He was shopping in the ladies' department, and he had spent hundreds of dollars each time, and it wasn't for her.
Becky is thunderstruck. Not only does it look like Bob is having an affair, he is spending a lot of money. And the ultimate insult, he's been asking her for months to cut back on expenses.
He was telling her that money was tight, that they needed to save for his retirement and for the possibility that this job wouldn't last.
Bob was the breadwinner, but he did the finances the majority of the time, so she never really saw the bills. She just saw the results.
And all the while, Bob discourages Becky from getting a job.
When he was gone, she would work, and when he would come back, he made her quit because she wasn't there to fix him dinner and do all the things that needed to do. Didn't cut the grass, didn't clean the house.
Becky waits before asking Bob about the purchases.
Until Becky had concrete evidence of anything, she knew better than to just blast off and say, you've done this or that.
Then the final straw. In November of 2008, she finds a letter from the bank, and it's a shock. Their home has been stripped of all its equity.
It should have been probably almost paid for, or maybe completely paid for, knowing, the income that he made in his career. It wasn't. All of this money was missing.
With concrete proof in hand, Becky finally confronts Bob.
They're arguing about finances and about where he's spending the money. And she said they got into a pretty darn good argument, a loud one, and she wasn't going to back down.
Always do it for you.
And he pulled a gun out of the desk drawer.
Becky remembers Bob pointing the gun at her, then at himself, and saying, "You'll never see any money." While Bob claims he never pointed the gun at Becky.
Bob said he waved the gun at himself and asked Becky if she would like for him to kill himself. Then Bob said Becky spat back at him. You don't have the guts.
Her sister imagines Bob's version is closer to the truth.
I'm pretty sure she egged him on. She probably said, you don't have the balls. And I'm pretty sure she cleaned it up for the deposition.
In the end, the facts don't matter. The truth is, Bob pulled a gun during an argument with his wife.
He had been able to talk her out of filing for divorce, I imagine, several times before. He couldn't do it this time. Waving the gun at her changed that
The next day, Becky starts divorce proceedings. She also files a protective order against Bob and asks the court to revoke his gun permit.
And then all of a sudden, here come the police and they extricate him from the house. Say you have to leave over the gun charge.
Bob checks into a hotel that night and eventually finds his own apartment. With her husband gone, Becky combs the house for more evidence of his erratic behavior. And she finds it.
She didn't know that he was buying guns. They came in boxes she wasn't allowed to open. These guns would end up in a closet that was locked.
Becky's divorce lawyer petitions the court for Bob's bank records. They learn he's also been going to high-end strip clubs and brothels in Nevada.
He paid $5,000 for sex that day, and apparently went back later that day because the next line item on the credit card receipt was for another $5,000 at the Bunny Ranch. So he spent $10,000 of the marital assets in one day.
More painful to Becky was the fact that he lavished gifts on a young waitress.
He bought her jewelry, bought her statuary, bought her clothes. He bought her a car, a $30,000 Ford Edge. Who does that? You give somebody a car that you don't even know?
This should have been their money and their assets that they had together and their life that they had, built. And instead, it was taken out behind her back and spent on someone else.
Becky finds love letters Bob had written to the waitress as well.
It was a very torrid sort of thing, that he was doing. It wasn't like he had picked one woman 50-some years old. He was having affairs and relationships with women who were no more than usually 30, 32.
Becky is devastated. Her 34-year marriage to Bob has amounted to this.
He didn't have Becky worshiping him. He didn't have anyone looking up to him in his career. He needed to find that. And so he went and sought out other women who would make him feel like he was valuable and appreciated.
Bob admits to having sex with prostitutes, but he insists his relationship with the waitress is platonic. They were just good friends.
He would claim until the day this all ended that was not a physical relationship. I think he treated her more like a daughter.
By the time the divorce makes it to trial, the evidence is overwhelming.
There were reams of credit card receipts. The poor legal assistants had to carry these things in. I actually helped them carry a couple of these, evidence 1, evidence 2, evidence 3.
Becky's lawyer proves Bob's spending is out of control.
He took an Alaskan vacation by himself or with somebody. He would routinely go to Cincinnati for the Bengals game. He had an apartment that he paid for there, and he bought a motorcycle. He was using that money to help fund his lifestyle.
Bob used the equity of their home to fund his exploits.
They had paid $200,000 for the house in 1987, and then some 20-some years later, they owed more on it than it was worth, and it was valued at $450,000.
According to her family, he forged Becky's name to secure a second mortgage and used the money to buy the waitress the SUV.
She found that document, and she had never signed it, but her name was signed on there.
He had forged her name to a car to give to some bimbo.
Bob's lawyer, on the other hand, tries to downplay his client's lifestyle by focusing on Becky.
Becky was being debased during the trial when it came to what she contributed to the marriage and what she was owed out of that marriage.
Bob's lawyer argues Becky was just a Navy wife who never worked.
She was made to look like she was not anything to him. It was an ugly tactic to use against any military spouse in that circumstance, period.
Most of all, he argues that Becky cost Bob his job as an admiral in the U.S. Navy. He argues his client was reprimanded during the tailhook scandal because of Becky's missteps.
Bob was getting ready to take over the John C. Stennis and the whole thing, and he was counseled by 2 3-star admirals to please control his wife.
And when it came time for his superiors to consider him for the position, it was too late.
Bob had a friend on the selection committee, and the friend was privy to the secret conversations and deliberations of the choice for admiral. Bob's friend told him that Becky came up in the discussions, and not favorably.
Bob's attorney implies that Becky cost Bob his job and his salary as an admiral.
What his attorney was looking at was all the income he was never going to make as a result of the actions that she took, that she doesn't get any of his future earnings or his retirement.
It's a long, bitter divorce, but after 2 years, it's finally over. On April 28th, the final divorce decree arrives by mail. Bob and Becky are expected in court on May 4th to sign the paperwork. Bob notes another date instead.
He writes on that calendar entry, True Blood, and it wasn't in reference to the television series.
Bob Klosterman pulls out a gun during an argument with wife Becky over their finances. She files for divorce and discovers that he's been leading a double life. After 35 years, their marriage is about to end.
Bob and Becky had agreed on a settlement for the divorce, and within days, they were going to be at the courthouse and settle once and for all.
The protection order against Bob is lifted, and despite their differences, Bob and Becky continue to see each other after they file for divorce.
They were going to counseling because that's part of the rules of the road and the divorce proceeding here.
Sometimes they even sleep together.
And they continue to have very intimate relationship, even through the divorce.
I think Becky and Bob continue to see each other because they do have a connection. They were in love once, and so I think that's part of what keeps luring them back to one another.
Over time, people come to fill roles in each other's lives that feel like huge voids when they leave, even if they were also causing a lot of pain and heartache and damage.
Bob feels comfortable enough to drop by unannounced, and neighbors often see them together. Sometimes they talk, often they argue.
A neighbor quietly let people know that they had seen things go on and arguments and things like that.
But now that the divorce proceedings are nearly over, Becky doesn't want to see Bob anymore. He seems more erratic as they approach the finish line.
I was helping her to move things. He didn't know I was in the house. And he came in, and his expression was one of pure anger, and he caught me out of the corner of his eye, and it changed like a mask.
The court also reinstates Bob's gun permit, and Becky is scared.
Becky was a nervous wreck that last year. She went down to 92, 95 pounds. She couldn't sit still. She couldn't sleep.
To his own family, Bob seems frustrated, but he's coping.
He was venting. Yeah, I'd say, oh, yeah, Bob, you're going to laugh about this in a couple years, So that's why I thought he was okay.
But as the realities of the divorce sink in, Bob becomes angrier.
The house would have been sold, period. There would have been no question. And other properties he may have owned or rented had to have ended. The lifestyle was going away, in other words.
The former couple had also racked up hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees.
Bob felt that the attorneys involved were bleeding them dry. Even if Bob had a decent income from his contracting job and his retirement, a lot of it was going to have to go to paying legal fees.
To Bob, it seems like he has nothing left.
He thought that everything was going to be going to Becky, that he was not going to have anything to live on even.
For the man to whom honor and status mean everything, Bob is completely ruined.
When he gets that decree and he realizes it's over, he's going to end up paying all this, and he's going to end up having to have nothing left, and probably nothing left of his reputation, even in the workplace.
On the Sunday before the Klostermans are to sign their final divorce papers, neighbors see Bob again.
Bob parked around the corner, walked in the neighborhood up to the house. They saw him. They waved hi, but nobody called police.
Becky notices Bob too.
She had written Bob was in the backyard at 6:30 a.m., where she was kind of making notes of, anything suspicious.
She goes for a drive to avoid him.
She'd gone out thinking that he'd be gone, be drawn off by the fact she was no longer in the house, and then she came back again, and he followed her into the house.
I did hear there were bruise marks on her arm in the shape of a handprint. So I think that he kind of manhandled her into that garage and forced her to lay down.
As it's told, she pulled out some of the moving boxes, and he shot her on the moving box because she didn't want to make a mess, because she didn't want us to have to clean it up.
No one hears a thing.
He needed some kind of fortification, and he hit the liquor cabinet, put the dogs out back, and walked back to where his car was.
Leading up to the killing, Bob had drafted a half-dozen or so letters to family and friends. He mails them before he carries out his final plan.
The police thought that he had dropped them in the mailbox that morning, and he drove the car up, locked it, and went into the house and finished.
About a half hour after he kills Becky, Bob dials 911.
He called the police saying that, he had done something to his wife and that they needed to come right away. And he did the same with himself, laid down on a piece of cardboard with both of their driver's license placed, right on top of their bodies, was the way that he did it. So there would be no mistaking who they were, and that's the way that they were found.
He shoots himself the same way he shot Becky, with a handgun in the chest.
And I keep patting myself in the head thinking, why didn't you see a sign? You should have saw something.
Never had an inkling that was going to happen.
A few days later, Bob's suicide letters start arriving by mail.
It looks to me like Bob had decided that there was nothing left to live for and that he was going to leave the world with an explanation of how wronged he felt he had been, and he was going to take with him the person that he externalized the blame for all of that onto, Becky.
I think Bob held a lot of feelings in and a lot of thoughts during his life. And so before he decided to commit the murder-suicide, he felt that it was important to get his story told. He wanted explanations, he wanted specifics, and he also wanted to place blame. He wanted it on the record that he thought that Becky was responsible.
In them, he blames Becky for most of the things that went wrong in his life. Bob tells everyone again how Becky cost him his future in the Navy.
The tailhook scandal changed the course of his life, took him off track. And, for someone who needed that structure and that sense of place, Bob lost that.
Bob also says Becky's decision to abort their twins is akin to murder.
He still was angry that his unborn children were murdered. Come on now, that was how many years ago? 30 years ago, and you're gonna harp on that? If that was the critical point, why didn't it end then?
Becky had also convinced him to leave a job he enjoyed to work for her cousin.
The whole time he was regretting leaving Newport News Shipbuilding. That was where he was happy. It's where he was working with people he had been in aviation with over the years.
Finally, Becky's decision to pursue the divorce stripped them of nearly everything.
He was very bitter about the legal fees. By Bob's reckoning, it cost $150,000. Bob felt that Becky could have made the divorce much easier, but she insisted on fighting it.
Bob lists countless reasons why Becky was accountable for his failures, but they could never justify his actions. Could it have been caused by repressed emotions from his combat days?
After the war in Vietnam, would there be some issues there? I would think yes. Now, do I think they manifested themselves from the 60s all the way to 2010 and caused him to do what he did? No. I think there's so many other layers to this story that got him to where he ended up.
This was too well scripted. He had practiced letters on his desk from the time of the divorce proceedings in court all the way up to May 2nd. He knew what he was doing, and he didn't stop himself.
Bob went to such great lengths in that suicide letter to illustrate why everybody but him was to blame for his troubles. I really think as a psychologist reading that letter, it suggests to me some denial, some active attempt to not think about all of the ways that his own character and decisions played into his outcomes in life.
Part of what a person wants to feel later in life is satisfaction. They want to be able to look back and say, I'm happy with the way my life went. And I don't think Bob could look back and say he was happy about anything.
When the policeman called, he said that, a lot of times Your brother was high in the Navy. He had control over thousands of people. The divorce was getting out of control. And when people are in a high position and they do make all these big decisions, that when it's taken out of their hands, they snap.
I think he saw that as the only end for the two of them. In his head, you can see that from reading the letter, that's what he saw as the only outcome because they were ruined.
And if he couldn't move on, neither would Becky.
She was going to pick up the pieces of her life, and she was going to move on, and she was going to have a good life. She was fun, she was energetic, she was nice. He was dull, bitter, mean, and now broke. So he had nothing to lose. So he wasn't just going to be miserable by himself.